Three pairs of socks at midnight and your feet are still cold. Not cool. Cold. The kind of cold that goes into the bone and doesn't leave, no matter how many blankets you pile on, no matter how long you wait. You stop sleeping well. You stop walking as far. You start to wonder, quietly, in the middle of the night, whether this is just what the rest of your life looks like. I'm 83 years old. I've had type 2 diabetes for 19 years. And for a long time, I believed exactly that. I believed cold feet, tingling feet, feet that burned in the summer and froze in the winter, were just the price of getting older with this disease. My doctor was a good man. He monitored my numbers, adjusted my medication, told me to watch my diet. He never once mentioned what I'm going to tell you today. Not because he didn't care. Because in an 8-minute appointment, there is only so much a physician can explain. The system doesn't give him time to cover what I've spent years learning on my own. What I drink every morning now costs me less than a cup of diner coffee. I've been doing it for 2 years. My feet are warmer, the burning at night has quieted, and when I told my doctor what I was doing, he didn't have a medical explanation for it. He just looked at my fasting numbers, looked at me, and said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I want to tell you what it is. But before I do, I need you to understand something that took me almost a decade to fully grasp, because without this piece, the drink won't make sense. And without the sense, most people try it for a week and quit. The burning, the tingling, the cold, those are not the disease. They are what happens downstream when the real problem goes unaddressed long enough. And the real problem has a name. It's called glycation. Specifically, advanced glycation end products. Researchers call them AGEs. Here is the mechanism, and I want you to pay attention to this part because this is what your doctor doesn't have 8 minutes to explain. When blood sugar stays elevated over time, those excess glucose molecules attach themselves to proteins in your body. They bind to them, and when that binding hardens and accumulates, it forms compounds that damage tissue. The tissue most vulnerable to this is the small caliber nerves and the tiny blood vessels, the microvascular system that serves your feet and lower legs. Research published in Nature by Dr. Michael Brownlee and confirmed in clinical guidelines by the American Diabetes Association has established this as the fundamental mechanism behind diabetic neuropathy and peripheral circulation damage. The nerves that tell your feet where they are, the vessels that carry warmth to your toes, they get attacked slowly over years by sugar that stayed too high for too long. That's not aging, that's chemistry. And chemistry can be influenced. Most people over 60 with blood sugar issues are watching their diet, taking their medication, doing what they've been told, and their feet are still cold. Their numbers are still creeping. Because there are layers to this problem that a prescription alone doesn't reach. The medication addresses what your liver does with glucose overnight. It doesn't address what your breakfast does to your blood sugar by 8 a.m. It doesn't address the microvascular environment that's been accumulating damage for years. And it does not address what your body is doing, or failing to do, in the first 30 minutes after you wake up. That's the window. The morning window. That's where what I drink comes in. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Cinnamon. Specifically, half a teaspoon of true cinnamon. Cinnamomum verum, the Ceylon variety. Dissolved in 8 ounces of warm water, drunk first thing in the morning before food, before coffee, before anything else. I know how that sounds. I was skeptical too. I'm not the kind of person who reaches for folk remedies. I spent 19 years trusting the clinical process. But then I started reading the clinical process on cinnamon specifically, and what I found surprised me. A study published in Diabetes Care one of the most respected peer-reviewed journals in endocrinology, found that daily cinnamon consumption was associated with meaningful reductions in fasting blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes. That finding has been replicated and reviewed across multiple trials, including a summary published in nutrition research journals that pointed consistently to the same pattern. Cinnamon, taken daily, is linked to measurable improvements in fasting glucose levels. Not dramatic, not a replacement for your medication, but measurable, consistent, and real. The proposed mechanism is that compounds in cinnamon, particularly cinnamaldehyde and certain polyphenols, appear to interact with insulin signaling pathways, making cells more responsive to insulin. In other words, it may help the key turn the lock more cleanly. And when fasting blood sugar starts running a little lower, consistently, over weeks and months, the glycation process, the AGE formation that attacks your nerves and your microvasculature, has less fuel to work with. Less sugar available to bind, less damage accumulating downstream. That's not a cure. I want to be honest with you about that. Your medication is still doing its job. Your doctor is still your partner in this. What the morning cinnamon water does, based on what the research suggests, is work on a layer that the prescription doesn't reach. The fasting glucose pattern in the earliest hours of the day, before the first meal, before the first dose. Talk to your doctor before adding anything new to your routine, especially if you're adjusting doses or managing other conditions. That conversation matters. But here's what I want you to understand about why this is particularly important for your feet and your legs specifically. The nerves in your feet are the longest peripheral nerves in the human body. The blood vessels that serve them are the smallest. That combination means they are the first to feel the effects of sustained high glucose, and they are the first to benefit when that glucose starts to stabilize. Research in the neuropathy literature, including clinical reviews from the American Diabetes Association, has consistently shown that the single most important modifiable factor in slowing peripheral nerve damage is long-term blood sugar control. Not a supplement, not a single food. The pattern of your glucose over time. What the cinnamon water may do is shift that pattern at its most vulnerable point, the morning fast. Now I want to tell you about 3 other things I do alongside the cinnamon water, because I have learned over 2 decades of living with this disease that nothing works in isolation. The body is a system. You treat it like a system, and you get system results. The first is magnesium. Research published in the Archives of Biochemistry and Biophysics indicates that somewhere between 1/4 and more than 1/3 of people with type 2 diabetes are running low in magnesium. This matters because magnesium is what your insulin receptors need to function properly. It is the mineral that allows insulin to do its job at the cellular level. I eat a palmful of raw pumpkin seeds every evening. 1 ounce, about 65 cents worth of pumpkin seeds. They're one of the most concentrated food sources of magnesium available. I've done this for over a year. I do not take it as optional. The second is movement after dinner. 10 minutes. Not a mile, not a gym. 10 minutes of walking. Around the block, around the house, it does not matter. When you move after a meal, your muscle cells activate a glucose transporter that pulls sugar out of your bloodstream independent of insulin. It does not require your pancreas. It does not care about your insulin resistance. Research in diabetes exercise science has consistently linked short post-meal walks to meaningful reductions in the blood sugar peak that follows dinner. And the blood sugar peak after dinner is what sets your body's overnight environment, which is what determines, in part, what your feet feel like at midnight. The third is dark chocolate, 70% cacao or higher, 1 small square in the afternoon, not as a treat, as a deliberate source of magnesium. The USDA's own food data puts a 1 ounce serving of dark cacao at roughly 64 milligrams of magnesium. And as a source of flavanols, the compounds in cacao that research published in the Journal of Nutrition has linked to improvements in how blood vessels dilate and respond. The same vessels that carry warmth and circulation to your feet. 1 square, that's the portion. This is not permission to eat half a bar. Cinnamon water in the morning, pumpkin seeds in the evening, 10 minutes of walking after dinner, 1 square of dark chocolate in the afternoon. That is the system I run. It is not expensive, The most expensive piece of it is the dark chocolate, and that's still under $5 a week. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, they trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. I've spoken with men and women who have had cold feet for so long they stopped mentioning it to their doctors. A woman I know, 77 years old, diabetic for 16 years, lives alone in Ohio, told me she hadn't felt her left foot properly in 4 years. She'd accepted it. Her physician had told her it was neuropathy, which was true, and had adjusted her medication, which was appropriate. But nobody had talked to her about fasting glucose patterns, morning windows, or the daily habits that work on layers the prescription doesn't reach. She started with just the cinnamon water, added the walk after dinner 6 weeks later. She told me 3 months in that she'd stopped wearing 3 pairs of socks to bed, that she could feel the floor under her feet when she got up at night to use the bathroom. I'm not telling you her story as a clinical result. I'm telling you her story because it's the same story I hear over and over from people who were never told there was another layer to address. If you've been living with cold feet, burning feet, feet that tingle and ache and keep you up at night, you have probably tried things. You have probably been told to manage your blood sugar and wait. I'm not asking you to stop managing. I'm asking you to add a layer that costs $3 and starts tomorrow morning. Half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon in 8 ounces of warm water, before anything else, every morning. If you're already taking medication for blood sugar, talk to your physician before adding this, especially if you are monitoring your numbers closely. Because if it works the way the research suggests it can, your numbers may shift and your doctor will want to know. That's a good problem to have, but it's a conversation to have together, not a surprise. Now I want to ask you something real. Think about the people you know your age, your friends, people from your congregation, family members, the ones who are still walking unassisted, who are still getting up and going, who are still doing what they love, and the ones who aren't, who lost that slowly over years until one morning the world got very small. What separated them? Some of it was luck, some of it was genetics, but a significant part, I've watched this closely for over 50 years, was the small, daily decisions nobody talks about. The habits that happen quietly, before breakfast, after dinner, at 10 o'clock at night when nobody's watching. The people who stayed strong and mobile paid attention to those hours. They didn't wait for a crisis to take the small things seriously. You're still here. You're still watching. That means you haven't stopped paying attention. Don't stop now. Drop the word cinnamon in the comments if you've tried it before or if you're going to start tomorrow. And tell me, what does your cold feet situation actually look like right now? 1 foot, both feet, nighttime only, all the time? I read every comment. I want to know where people are starting. The link for the full support protocol I use alongside everything I shared today is below this video. It walks through the morning and overnight system in detail, the timing, the combinations, the adjustments for people on metformin or insulin. Everything I've shared today is a starting point. That link is the complete picture. And remember what I said at the beginning. Your doctor's plan is still your foundation. What we are doing here is building on top of it, alongside it, with his knowledge, not around it. That distinction matters. It protects you. Start tomorrow morning. Warm water, half a teaspoon, before anything else. Let's see what your mornings look like in 90 days.